Joining us now is the brain of the operation, Chap Peterson, State Senator, Democrat, Fairfax. We're deep behind enemy lines. This is Libomania Day. General Assembly in the Commonwealth of Virginia convenes this week, and we're at Chap Peterson World Headquarters in Fairfax City. David Marston, Democratic Senator, the Hammer here, hates Trump, and he's going to be offering his perspective. Ben Tribbett never makes it before 7:30 a.m., except if he stays up all evening and he's in Las Vegas. He'll be joining us momentarily, as will former Republican Congressman Tom Davis.
Right.
But it's great to have you guys.
John, thank you for being here. It's great to have you behind enemy lines or within the warm confines of Fairfax City, as I like to call it.
It is always good being here and to get you guys perspective. Look, we got some football we're going to do, but we're going to wait for Ben to do that because we got to talk about the Redskins and what goes on in the future with that. We're going to get our Super Bowl predictions, all that right here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. So let's just start with the big picture. Let's start with David, because I know you're chomping at the bit. You've been here for about 20 minutes, and you're not happy with the whole government shutdown, the wall. You think the whole thing is a disaster. Give us your perspective. Senator Marston.
Good morning, John. How are you? Yeah,
Great.
this is a pretty sad affair to shut the government down over this. Let me tell you an interesting anecdote from my days as director of the Department of Juvenile Justice. I had my own wall controversy. I had a judge who we desperately needed one of his two courtrooms. He only had he had two courtrooms in this one jurisdiction, and the staff needed this courtroom for to turn into office space for the probation officers. But the judge wanted a wall. He wanted a retractable wall so that he could push a button when he was switching from a public hearing to a private hearing, rather than asking everybody to go out in the hallway. And he insisted. And it was a big showdown with the Department of Juvenile Justice over "I want my wall." And this isn't any more serious.
Who was going to pay for it?
And who was going to pay for it? I mean, this just gets silly. I understand everybody, at times has to, to make a point. But the problem here is that the point he's making is not going to make America any safer. We've got the wall up in all the places that it needs to be for the most part, and we do need border security. We do need additional staff down there. We're having a crisis in Central America. You've heard the old anecdote, haven't you, John, about the babies in the river? A couple of people are down on the riverbank and they see a baby float by, so they jump in the water and they pull the baby out. And next thing you know, another baby's floating down the river. And these two guys are starting to pull babies out of the river. And finally, one of them starts walking upstream. And the other one goes, "Where are you going? We got all these babies floating down the river." And he says, "Well, I'm going to go upstream and find out who's throwing these babies in the river. We know what's happening in Guatemala and El Salvador and these places. That's where we need to go to prevent these families from showing up at our doorstep with these great needs and the fear that they have of these drug cartels that are running their communities."
Right.
And
well, the
the
Mexican government here, just answer me this question, then I'm going to get to Chap. So AMLO, the new president of Mexico, the socialist president who is committed to rebuilding the infrastructure of the country, spending money there and dramatically increasing oil exploration. He offered 4,000 work visas, 1-year work visas, to the migrants who were at who were in Tijuana. He said he had 4,000 job openings, so they offered 4,000 1-year work visas and an opportunity to apply for a job and live safely in Mexico. After 25 days, 195 applied. So what about the other 3,800? If they're fleeing what you're talking about, why not just take the visa in Mexico, get a job, and be safe? The problem is they want to come to the United States because they want to take advantage of our generous welfare benefit system, or they would take the jobs in Mexico. So your argument's nonsense.
No, it's not nonsense, John. It is, and I have no idea what's going on down there, and actually neither do you. But the
I
issue
just know the
is,
facts.
I
know what the facts are.
It's a fact, but the problem is
they got offered jobs in Mexico. They didn't take the jobs.
Yeah, Mexico.
So if they're so what you're saying is it isn't about safety. It isn't about a job. It's about coming to the United States, because Mexico was offering them safety. Mexico was offering them a pathway to get a job there and a better family, and they're turning him down. They want to bum rush the U.S. That you have an open borders policy. Why not just admit it?
There is no open borders policy. The problem here is that, under United States law, when people come here to the United States seeking asylum from those situations, we have an obligation to put them through a process that determines the legitimacy.
90% of those seeking asylum get rejected under U.S. law. 10% make it in. But here's what happens. As soon as they step over the border and they read their script by a U.S. lawyer in Spanish that says, I want asylum, and they read all the words, right? As soon as they get in, they can only be put in a holding opportunity for 20 days, and then they're released. And it might be 18 months before they get a hearing. And 90% are deemed to be false. That's the average we have.
That's where we need to spend our money.
So
to
they
get
just released into the
smoothly.
interior of the United States.
That's the system we need to fix, John.
That's
where the money needs to go.
Okay, well, I have to say this conversation reminds me of an earlier election when I was asked my position on the West Bank, and I said if Maryland's on it, they better get the hell off. So, listen, I'm a state senator. I don't run on foreign policy. I don't really know the details of the border like you just recited. I do think it's obviously, juvenile to shut down a federal government over this type of issue. Having said that, hopefully the two sides can get together and work it out. I have thousands of constituents right now that are staying at home and not able to work because of this, and it's frustrating to them, and they ought to be frustrated. So
how do we get it solved? I mean, having people out of work and not getting food stamps and not getting IRS refunds is absurd. How do we solve this?
Well, you know what? I think Nancy Pelosi, the president, and McConnell, they are the three sort of holders of power right now. They need to just sit down and say, look, what's it going to take? And everyone, everything is a compromise. Trump is already saying that he can do this based on his executive power anyway, or he could do it through the military, the Army Corps of Engineers, or whatever, then fine, then do it.
Do it, right?
Right.
Do
so
it.
I don't know why, again, at some point, true leadership is being willing to be unpopular sometimes, even with the people that support you. And at some point, I just think those leaders have to get together and get it done. And but like I said, in the 34th Senate District, which is what I care about, I got people that aren't working right now, so that's a problem.
Is he going to cave?
Is who going to cave?
Trump.
We all cave at some time. I mean, listen, I got news for you. I've been practicing law for 25 years. I have tried some of the highest intensity cases you can imagine, and I settle cases all the time. Sometimes I don't, and I go to trial, but there are always times when I recommend to a client, you know what, we're going to take less, or we're going to take a deal, or we're going to take a plea, and you know what, because at the end of the day, that's what makes sense. And people want to say you didn't have the guts to go to trial, or you're back, you know what? People are going to say what they're going to say.
You got to make a business
decision. At some point, you got to make a deal.
You got to make a deal for your client.
John, just let's look what
David?
President Trump did with the abrupt pullout of Syria. All of a sudden now we got Bolton coming out saying, well, that's not really the way we're going to do this. We're going to stay there. We need to make sure that we put the stake in ISIS's heart. We need to protect the Kurds from the Turks. And all of a sudden it's a change in policy. And I think there's a way out here if he will just accept border security without a physical wall, which really doesn't move the needle very much in terms of American safety.
So now your liberals are for interventionism all over the world. You've been screaming about wars. Now you want troops in Syria, Afghanistan,
we've had
Somalia.
Troops in Syria.
But now you want war now.
John,
now you're the warmonger party.
That's ridiculous. John, that is absolutely ridiculous. We've been in Syria. The question is, once you get into something, how do you pull out without pulling the rug out from under your friends and the people you've been there to protect and the people you're there? The Kurds have been fighting alongside us in Syria.
Kurds are
not. ISIS.
We never went there to protect the Kurds. We went there to eradicate ISIS.
That
job is done. It's not our job to
but
protect.
we incorporated the Kurds in that effort.
Kurds want a piece of the territory of Syria. That's just not our position. And this president campaigned to get the hell out of there 3 years ago.
Let the Kurds worry about that stuff after ISIS is gone and what have you. But right now, we don't pull the rug out from under those folks. Let's put the stake in ISIS
troops
first.
All over the world and more troops in Afghanistan. All of a sudden, the Democratic Party now, it doesn't. If Trump came out for a cure for polio, you guys would be opposed to it. You're so ridiculous. Let's get to some of the. It's just ridiculous. Let's just get to some of the one of the local issues here, chap.
Yes, sir.
and one that's close to my heart. You've got 2019 Virginia General Assembly convening.
Yep.
So I'm going to start with my first question, which is Kirk Cox, which is the last barrier for Republicans before the whole state collapses to complete blue in perpetuity. The House of Delegates Speaker, he's got a 1-vote majority, and he won that on a coin toss.
Right.
Came out Friday with a huge tax cut, basically wants to mirror the Trump tax cut for Virginians. What do you think?
I'd have to say dead on arrival. I mean, first of all, Kirk Cox is just not in a position to be dictating massive swings in public policy. He's just not. I mean, like you said, he's, one name in a canister away from being, just another delegate. So, if he wants to come out with a big, tax cut plan, the bottom line is the governor's already proposed his budget. The governor calls the shots. Now, I understand the Republicans have a nominal majority in both houses, and so they can modify that, and I expect they will. I hope they will. I mean, that's what we do in the legislature. But the idea that we're suddenly going to dictate some major public policy change from a 1-seat majority in the House or a 1-seat majority in the Senate is ludicrous.
But his position is if you're benefiting under the new Trump tax cut plan federally because you're not taking the deductions, you're going to get hurt in Virginia because you have to go one way or the other. You can't switch it.
And I agree with that. But I think there's a way to do that where we can conform to the federal plan. We do need to move up the minimum standard deduction. I'm in agreement with that, okay? And we need to marry up with the federal law. I'm in agreement with that. So if the issue is just, okay, the Republicans passed the federal tax plan, and we need to match up with that. I have no objection to that. Because I agree. And you know what? I would say the same thing if the Republicans, if the Democrats had done it, or if, what they did back in '86. But that's a different issue. In terms of sort of matching up the deductions to meet with each other, yeah, we're going to have to do that now. We are going to have kind of a one-time windfall that we have in this biennium, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But this idea that we're going to sort of, Kirk Cox or anybody from that matter from a 1-seat majority is going to start dictating what's going to happen.
1-seat majority on a coin flip.
Yeah,
basically, yeah.
It is. John, the problem that the tax cuts created was that 26% of Virginians are going to be net losers here. In other words, they've done this, great federal tax cut, but at the end of the day, after they do both their federal and their state taxes, they're paying more. That's 26%.
Well, they're paying more of state tax.
State tax, but
right.
it
more
overrides their federal savings.
I get it.
They're net losers.
More is more,
and we've got to figure that out to make them whole. And I think one of the ways to do that is perhaps to stagger, if you will, the standard deduction, based on certain levels of income, so that we can balance this whole thing out, so that everybody becomes a winner. We can continue to do something for the EITCA.
I would caution against that, because the people who are going to be losers are people like me. Not that I'm complaining, but since I give money to my church, I give money to charity, and so we itemize on the federal return. Well, the itemizations will be capped, but of course we get a higher minimum standard deduction on the federal, which means that we're going to have a higher aggregate gross income on the state, but still have the same lower minimum standard deduction. So people like myself will pay more. Now, listen, I'll pay less on the Fed, more on the state, so I'll pay probably less overall. So I'm not crying. Trust me.
I think my understanding, chap, is that there are going to be a significant number of people who are net losers when you add up the whole thing.
So the Democrats have to. So let me just boil it down. So you've got two options. One option is to do the right thing and say let's align the Virginia tax code with the federal tax code, so 26% people aren't hit. Or you could do the opposite, which is, see, Trump sucks. You're going to pay more. Which is going to be?
Well, I think our obligation in the legislature is to do the math, do the hard work to get this right for people. The interesting thing with the EITC, and the reason I'm a fan of that in terms of the governor getting money in those hands, is we're having an economic crisis still in our rural areas in Virginia. And I read an interesting article that increasing the EITC has been the one thing that has worked to improve economies in rural America. Not all of these special tax deals for businesses to relocate and do all this stuff. Just get money in the hands of people who will spend it, and it spurs your economy. It's not a panacea. It doesn't do amazingly incredible things, but it is an improvement and it is progress.
I totally agree with Dave. I would say both. I think we can do EITC. We need to conform with the federal code. Okay, period.
Agree.
But and take it from someone that I just wrote a pretty darn big large check to the state. Our economy's been growing for the past 2 years. We're going to have a surplus. We're going to have sales tax proceeds that we had not anticipated a year ago because of the Wayfair decision. We can do both, in my opinion. Okay, I think we can do both. Now, are we going to do them both? Right off the bat, we may have to phase in the EITC. But the bottom line is, I think we can match up with the federal code. We can make sure no one gets caught on that. But by the same token, I agree 100% with Dave. EITC, making it refundable, puts actual money back in the hands of working people. It makes all the sense in the world.
So this is from Sean in Newport News, who says, listening to liberals call for tax cuts is really interesting. Both of you guys, I wouldn't call Chap a liberal, more of a libertarian, but Dave is, I guess, kind of a moderate. But, both of you now calling in Virginia to align the tax cut with, to align the federal tax cut. And Dave, you're calling for putting more money in the hands of people and taking out of the government.
Well,
I love that, by the way. I love how you phrase that.
I was not a fan of the tax cuts. I think the taxes on corporations, that was the reduction there was probably a pretty good thing. But at the upper levels of income, we still have a huge disparity problem, income disparity problem in this country. And I'm not a fan of the Trump tax cuts. That being said, they're real. They've happened. They're the law. And now it's up to us to make sure that it impacts Virginia in the most beneficial way possible. And that's getting it rebalanced among the different, stratas of our income earning citizens, and making sure that at the end of the day we get some money where it will actually help rural Virginia. Because believe it or not, as much as we seem like we're in a bubble here in Northern Virginia, I care very deeply about the struggles that people in rural Virginia have gone through, and the fact that people in Northern Virginia sometimes just don't understand the stresses these folks are under.
Wow, you're not going to fit into the Octavio Cortez wing of the party. Sorry, Dave.
Well, I would actually, I'm going to take, not disagreeing with Dave, but one of these sort of, I guess you could call it, byproducts of the Trump presidency is you now have all these Democrats that are representing wealthy areas. And I think I read somewhere that the top 20 congressional districts in terms of median household income are all represented by Democrats. And it's just, it's a sociological phenomenon, whatever you want to call it. But like Wexton's district, Connolly's district, Beyer. And so the result is these folks are in office now, and there's no way in God's green earth they're going to vote for like a 50% marginal tax increase on their own citizens. It's just not going to happen. So, you can have a lot of people out there, and I forget the lady from the Bronx, her name, but she can be talking about 70% tax brackets. There's no way in the world Nancy Pelosi's going to let that come to a vote. Yeah. There's just no way.
John, it was one thing to have those kinds of tax rates as America was recovering after World War II.
Yeah, we're fighting now that we're
in that kind of a situation. Should there be some? Should there be some increases at some of the upper levels? Yeah, but nothing draconian like what she's talking about.
I found it amazing that I don't know how she is the young lady, 26 or something, and good for her that she's there. But I just found it stunning that she had, 26 minutes on 60 minutes. I shook my head at that one. It's like you got all these people that have been there forever, and you're interviewing somebody that's been there, a day, basically.
It's her 15 minutes, John.
It's pretty amazing, and she's calling for 70%. Basically, she's calling for a socialistic America, worse than Bernie Sanders is. But we'll see how that goes. Look, you guys, we're getting to the bottom of the hour. We got a lot to talk about today, but you guys should be in Washington because even this first 15 minutes, I mean, you're willing to compromise. You guys remind me, Chap and David, Marston, you remind me of the Democrats that came in '06 under Pelosi when she said, "Drain the swamp. Let's get government back working for people. Let's get out of the war." They had a message. Jim Webb, remember that win, beat Allen in '06, and put up his son's combat boots and says, "Time to bring our troops home." I mean, you guys sound like those Democrats, not the ones that I heard on Thursday and Friday talking about impeach the MFer.
That's because, John, down in Richmond, we do compromise, and we do work reasonably well together on 95% of the issues that we have to deal with.
Well,
and
you guys
it's a mindset.
You guys are reasonable. John Fredericks Radio Network, bottom of the hour. We're going to be right back. Chap Peterson, State Senator David Marston. We're at Chap Peterson, the world headquarters deep behind enemy lines, Fairfax City. You can't get bluer than where I am.